Thank you very much, and good morning all, and welcome. We are here this morning to do some wonderful training on BPA M&V protocols. Okay, so title of this is BPA's Measurement Verification for Commercial and Industrial Programs. It does expand to other sectors too, but most of our focus here is on the C&I. And overall, custom projects require measurement verification. Typical rate period in recent years has like a quarter to a third of the overall savings portfolio from custom projects. And measurement verification also plays a key role in our emerging energy efficiency tech projects. So we recognize the need to update these documents from time to time, as well as offer training to new and not so new energy efficiency staff. So this is the M&V team that was involved from the get-go when we first decided to enhance and update the MT&R reference guide to the new C&I SEM M&V reference guide. And the team on the Bonneville side was myself, Jamie Anthony, and Eric Mollendor, working with the Facility Energy Solutions team, which included Leah Webster, Josh Weiser, Kevin Campbell, and Ann Joyner. And I'll give an introduction to each of them. Facility Energy Solutions is a small consulting firm in Bend, Oregon, provides technical consulting to utilities, governments, and other implementing energy programs. Facility Energy Solutions is a certified women business enterprise and disadvantaged business enterprise in the state of Oregon. Leah Webster is a principal at Facility Energy Solutions. She acted as project manager and coordinated the team for the BPA M&V updates we mentioned. Energy 350 is a 40-person energy efficiency consulting company based in Portland, Oregon, and specializes in energy efficiency program design and implementation, including strategic energy management, energy engineering, evaluation, M&V, and other energy efficiency program support services. Energy 350 recently evaluated California's SEM efforts and was just awarded a contract within BPA territory. I'm interested in learning more about that. Energy 350 staff includes Josh Weiser, professional engineer, CMVP, practice lead, Kevin Campbell, PE, CMVP, and Director of Strategic Energy Management. Kevin's primary responsibility includes managing Energy 350's delivery of SEM services. Stillwater is an energy management consulting company based in Portland, Oregon. Stillwater has delivered programs in the U.S. and Canada, specializing in strategic energy management. Ann Joyner, here today, is the SEM engineer, chair of the Northwest SEM Collaborative North M&V Working Group. She's a SEM coaching support across Stillwater's portfolio of SEM programs, including Tacoma Power, Clark Public Utilities, and BC Hydro. Ms. Webster has authored many publications, including the U.S. government's M&V guidelines for performance contracts. Her expertise in M&V of energy savings has developed over decades of field practice and industry leadership activities. She currently chairs the International Performance Measurement Verification Protocols Subcommittee on M&V 2.0, or Advanced M&V, and was editor-in-charge for the 2022 update of the IPMVP. Ms. Webster graduated in mechanical engineering from Georgia Institute of Technology, is a registered professional engineer and a certified commissioning provider and a CMVP. That, we'll turn it over to team.
Great. Thank you, Todd. Good morning, everyone. My name is Leah Webster. Thank you for that nice introduction, Todd, and thank you, Ann, for being here. Goals of today's webinar are to build familiarity with BPA's M&V resources. There's quite a lot of resources. It's a deep pool, and so we want to make sure that people understand the major differences between the M&V protocols that are included in the resources. And then we want to, if we have time, go through some examples of selecting an M&V method and protocol for BPA. And then at the end of the meeting, we want to make sure that we have enough time to get your feedback on some of the M&V updates that are being considered. And so if you haven't gotten into that Mentee meter, that's the most important part, is really getting the feedback. If you have any ideas on M&V updates, and so you can, and also so you can respond to some of the updates that have been proposed by the evaluation team. So the agenda for today is to talk about M&V requirements in general for BPA, which involves looking at the difference between custom and simplified approaches, and then taking a quick look and an introduction to BPA's M&V library. And then before we get into the M&V methods in a deep way, we want to talk about M&V approaches in general and the key criteria in selecting the correct M&V protocol and approach to use in the BPA portfolio. M&V methods, we've really broken it down to the 3 primary M&V protocols, so that although the library and the resource list is very deep and has a lot of resources, by focusing on these 3 primary approaches, I think it'll help you make a little bit of sense and provide a roadmap to BPA's guides and other resources. And then finally, as I mentioned, we want to talk about the M&V updates that the evaluation team has proposed, as well as a couple of ideas that this team has put forward. All right, well, let's just jump right in. It's a quarter after. We have a little over an hour, and we want to talk about measurement and verification. Measurement and verification is so fundamental to energy efficiency and to BPA's energy efficiency portfolio. I don't think that it can be overemphasized. So energy efficiency projects, the actual energy savings and the incentives are established by the measurement and verification activities. Very crucial in terms of outcomes, in terms of how much savings we're able to log and how incentives are distributed. It also ensures that the programs are cost effective. Measurement and verification for BPA's portfolio has an oversight role by the Regional Technical Forum, or the RTF, who actually sets the M&V methods. These are seen, it's a deep set of RTF resources. They actually have created the fundamental rules in which our programs operate under. They provide impact guidance on impact and process evaluations for our programs, and the measurement and verification as defined by the RTF is applied in BPA's implementation manual. The implementation manual actually details how the RTF M&V methods are executed in the portfolio. Oops. The buttons are hiding. So one of the core and fundamental documents are the RTF's operative guidelines for the assessment of energy efficiency measures. And since 1999, the RTF has been providing oversight to BPA and the Northwest Power Council on how to assess the energy savings from efficiency measures. And it is this document that defines how that is to be done. And then trouble with my buttons. So specifically, the RTF operative guidelines divide and talk about the division between unit energy savings, UES, and simplified measures using a standard protocol and custom measures. Non-custom measures do not require full M&V of savings. The UES and standard protocol methods have been developed for many measures to simplify the analysis and data collection requirements so that energy savings the average energy savings achieved are used. So within these RTF operative guidelines, you'll see that it categorizes measures. There are not only the UES and standard protocol and custom, there's a number of other subcategories of measures. It talks about how a baseline should be defined and why, using either preconditions or current practice baselines. It discusses savings calculations, procedures, details the documentation that is expected when we are implementing energy efficiency measures. It talks about impact evaluations, and it also provides some program level requirements that may be of interest to this group. So just some background there, that this is the underlayment functionally for our implementation manual. And our implementation manual, the latest and greatest, is 2022. It's a big document. It's 225 pages about, and it details all of the UES and standard protocol measures. It also details the custom measures and what is expected from using a custom protocol. Currently, the Interim Solutions 2.0 provides the backup and the details to these unit energy savings and standard protocol measures. We have tools and calculators that are posted there, reporting tools, and other useful items. It won't be very long now. I don't know if you have a date, Todd, for when the BEAT system is going to be up, but I know you guys have been talking about it for some time now.
Yes, we have some early adopters or a soft start beginning next week, Monday. Then I believe mid-November is the full expected launch date for BEATs.
Exciting. Okay. Until then, Interim Solutions 2.0. All right, now we'll just take a quick look at the implementation manual. I'm sure everyone on this call is very familiar with it. What I'd like to bring your attention to is that for each of the unit energy savings or UES or standard protocol measures, the implementation manual does a really nice job of documenting what the basis of energy savings are, what the requirements and specifications of the retrofit measure are, the documentation required for reporting into BPA, the incentives and payment information, as well as any additional information on the measure. And so very well organized, very well articulated. In the implementation manual, it really does a great job of explaining all of the UES measures, and it's pretty clear even to a novice who's not an expert in the area about whether or not the measure qualifies as a UES. They've done a nice job of breaking it down and explaining it well. It's organized by sector, so we have agriculturals in Chapter 7, commercials in Chapter 8, and industrial is in Chapter 10. Now, the reason that I'm telling you this and the reason that we're covering this in this presentation is to focus on custom measures. We're here to talk about the custom M&V protocols, but if it's possible to avoid doing custom and full M&V, then by implementing and claiming a UES measure, then we really encourage you to claim UES measures. It's a lot less work. There's been a lot of time and effort spent developing these so that there is a shortcut and you don't have to do the site level M&V. So this is the agricultural, and I won't pretend to know what these are, but I would But I did pick out one just to take a look at it to see. So I picked out one and just kind of ran through it for myself. And I picked out the first one on the list, and it's an irrigation system conversion. And if you look in the implementation manual, it's really very clear. I don't know the first thing about really about irrigation, but it was very clear to me as a mechanical engineer to be able to read through the one pager that they had there in chapter 7 and to readily be able to assess whether or not it applies. So these are the ones for commercial. The commercial ones are a little bit more familiar to me, at least. There's, of course, a big focus on rooftop unit conversions, air source heat pumps. Of course, with our efforts to decarbonize, you'll find those are on this list, along with some variable frequency drive applications and advanced controls. The industrial chapter has compressed air and a few other things, a lot of strategic energy management pathways there I see. Water, welders, batteries. So that's an overview. Those are at the beginning of each chapter. They have this nice summary of each of the UES measures. And then as you go deeper into the document, you can find the 1-pager or 2-pager on each one of the UES measures. Okay, so now we can talk about custom projects. So hopefully you'll be able to identify when you don't have a custom project, and you can take a shortcut and use a UES measure. The UES measures can be included in your custom projects. They can be handled either as a UES measure or as part of the custom project. But custom projects require custom measurement and verification. And the requirements vary by the type of program that you're in and by the level of savings expected. There are no real hard and fast rules in terms of measurement and verification for custom projects. In the BPA portfolio, there's a lot of judgment that goes on. And if you look in the implementation manual, you'll find that the measurement and verification, they simply say you will use engineering calculations with verification, or you will make a comprehensive measurement and verification plan. And when they say comprehensive measurement and verification plan, they mean real M&V pre and post measurements. So those are the two big choices, and then they mandate that we select an M&V method or protocol to use utilizing the BPA protocol selection guide. So we're going to be looking at the protocol selection guide in a little bit of some detail today. There's the library. If you're not familiar with the library, there's a lot of stuff in there, and that is the goal of today's program, is to show you the library. They just had a recent website revision, and it was reposted just within the last couple of months, I believe, and it's a nice update. It's well organized. All of the protocols, or at least most of the protocols, were updated around 2018 and 2019. The protocols for BPA are really, really good. This is not your average utility level M&V library. This is a world-class M&V library. And the resources there have been developed by myself and my colleagues who are very well respected and have many years doing measurement and verification. So we have Bill Curran and David Jump and other folks who are very well respected and have articulated these methodologies in the BPA guides. Our team just revised the MT&R guide, and it is now the Strategic Energy Management M&V reference guide for both commercial and industrial projects. So we feel pretty happy about that update. So this is actually what the web landing page of the BPA M&V resource library looks like. So when you land here, you'll have these 7 sections that are nicely organized. And we're going to step through those so that you'll know where to find all of the resources and what's in there. Okay, so these are our 7 sections. So we have background, the M&V protocol selection guide, then it's categorized as fully adherent with IPMVP protocols, engineering calculations with verification, being a very core method as was called out directly in the implementation manual. We have the application guides, the reference guides, and then the related resources or the big categories. So the selection guide is where we're going to start, and it's where we're going to linger today as we go through the other guides. The M&V protocol selection guide, an example M&V plan. As we mentioned earlier, this is mandated in the BPA implementation manual as the way to determine what M&V protocol you should be using in a given circumstance. It provides a really nice overview of all of the protocols, what they're meant to be applied to. It also provides some good general guidance on key considerations when you're developing an M&V plan and making decisions around the M&V methodology. There's an M&V protocol selection flowchart, and so we're going to be taking a look at that flowchart today. I have a couple of examples. Hopefully, we'll have time to go through those, and if not, you can take a look at those later. And then it also has a nice M&V example plan, very straightforward example to show what is expected. Here are those resources that we are. So we're with engineers. So the ones we're going to be covering today are the engineering calculations with verification, as well as BPA's fully adherent M&V protocols, which are these two, the verification by equipment in use metering and verification by energy modeling. And energy modeling in this particular term means whole building mathematical style modeling as opposed to simulation modeling. So these are our 3 big protocols that kind of all of the other protocols can be associated with for BPA. So we're going to be focused on these today. But before we start talking about the very specific BPA stuff, I wanted to have a little bit of background and talk a little bit about IPMVP and some of the basic M&V concepts and methodologies that are so critical, regardless of which approach that you take. Indeed, we just had our 25th anniversary of the IPMVP, which is used worldwide. It's been translated into 10 languages and is used in over 40 countries. Todd and I are both on the IPMVP technical committee and worked quite hard on the revision that was just released this past March. So if you were amongst the crew that was voted for the 2016 being the most recent, I would encourage you to log on and download a new copy of this document. It's nicely improved. Adherence has been trued up and is a little bit more straightforward. The IPMVP provides terms and definitions, the savings equations, and it really details, in order to be adherent with IPMVP, you have to meet the M&V plan and reporting requirements, as well as follow the equations and the principles. But the plan and reporting requirements are very detailed, they're very precise, and they're outlined quite clearly in the new IPMVP, as well as the previous version as well. There weren't too many changes to the M&V plan, and reporting requirements. But this is the fundamental definitions and concepts that we use. The M&V options, A, B, C, and D, are called an IPMVP, are reflected in BPA's portfolio of protocols as they are in other applications of measurement and verification. Core concepts regarding having an apples to apples comparison of pre and post energy measurement using routine and non-routine adjustments are very fundamental to all of the methods that you might consider using for your measurement and verification efforts on a custom level, on a site level. IPMVP requires pre and post energy measurements. There are 4 different options, which are defined as A, B, C, and D. They have vast differences in the data that's required, the analysis that's completed, and the engineering expertise that's really required to implement those. So these offer a nice range of options. We have retrofit isolation in option A and option B. Option A is, so in option A is key parameter measurement, where option B is all parameter measurement, which functionally implies you're measuring energy use or all of the parameters required to get to energy use. A whole facility, option C, this is also known as the advanced M&V strategies that are very popular now. And then option D is calibrated simulation. This is typically our last choice in options, as it usually requires more effort than other options, but is mandatory almost for things like new construction or where you really don't have a baseline. So the retrofit isolation, option A and option B, are defined by this equipment measurement boundary. So you draw the measurement boundary where all of the energy used within this box is being measured as a part of your measurement and verification effort, along with relative independent variables. And when you're doing a whole building method, of course, we're using usually using the whole building utility meters data to assess the energy use within the entire facility. So this captures interactive ECMs, everything that's going in. It's very sensitive to non-routine events. If something else is, if it's not a steady state operation or a predictable operation, the whole facility measurement boundary can be a little bit of a difficult choice. So that's our measurement boundary, and those are our 4 IPMVP options, A, B, C, and D. And these are our BPA M&V protocols. So we can map, these are 3 big protocols that we're going to be talking about today, and they cleanly map to option A, B, C, and engineering. And I didn't note it here, but it seems like we should have noted option either not adherent or an option D. The engineering calculations do include the energy simulation modeling. So if you map these to the rest of the BPA M&V portfolio, what you'll see is you have your verification by equipment and in-use metering, and that's either going to be an option A or an option B. This is an equipment level or an end-use level metering. So this is energy metering. It could be an option A where you're metering key parameters instead of the entire energy. And then you have the in-use metering absent baseline measurement application guide. And that squarely fits underneath the verification by end-use metering. And that's if your baseline data is either not available or is not applicable for some reason. The next one is the energy modeling, verification by energy modeling protocol. And this is a clear and full application of the IPMVP option C. And you'll notice we have 4 documents in addition to the primary energy modeling protocol that supports this, and it's nuanced applications or additional information of the energy modeling protocol. So we have the energy use indexing protocol, and that's a simplification to normalize for the existing building commissioning protocol application guide, if you're doing an existing building commissioning project, system level. The CNI Strategic Energy Management Measurement Verification Reference Guide, which we just updated. If you're doing an SEM program, you might want to use this one. And then the M&V Regression Reference Guide is an underlayment to all of these. This really provides the statistics and the background that supports the rest of these guides. And then finally, we have the engineering calculations with verification. And this is not an IPMVP adherent document, as pre and post energy measurements are required by IPMVP to conduct real M&V, but engineering calculations with field verification are often an excellent substitute in many circumstances, especially when the savings do not warrant the effort to make those measurements. Before we get into looking at each one of these documents, it's really important to just recognize that the IPMVP and the BPA M&V protocols really offer a range of M&V options. And these are going to vary by the data available at your site, your project circumstances. And so there's really an inordinate number of decisions that have to be made when you're doing custom M&V. There's never a single right answer, and there's never a single wrong answer, although you can do M&V wrong, I guess. But the differences in the measured data will oftentimes determine which approach is going to be the most viable. The different methods require different levels of engineering expertise and different expertise in different things. Energy metering, energy whole building data analysis, and simulation engineering are all different skill sets, and not everyone is going to have those skill sets. So it's very also important to recognize that within your realm of your project, what method is going to make the most sense given your engineering expertise. And then, how good is good enough? That's the biggest question with measurement and verification. There's variation in the level of accuracy or the level of uncertainty, as some people like to talk about, the level of M&V costs, the amount of time that are involved in conducting the measurement and verification. And those are all judgment calls. So that's just a very important consideration, and you should be able to find a good sweet spot for your given project within this range of options. Now, regardless of the option that you end up doing, you're going to be functionally doing the same thing, and that is looking at your measured baseline energy use along with your independent variables that drive what this energy use is, and comparing it to the measured reporting period energy. But before you compare it, that baseline energy use is adjusted. It is adjusted to be what it would have been without the energy project. So if the weather has changed, if the production rates have changed, the inclusion of the independent variables along with your measured baseline energy allows you to make that adjustment to ensure that you have an apples to apples comparison so that when you do the math and actually calculate the energy savings, and in BPA we do avoided energy consumption, so it's not normalized, it's the actual reporting period energy compared to your adjusted baseline energy. So clearly, establishing the baseline and selecting the correct baseline is paramount when conducting the M&V, regardless of the method that you're using. The baseline energy is the energy used within the measurement boundary, right? So it's your baseline energy used typically for a whole year, and it's either based on the actual equipment efficiency and in situ conditions, the as-found conditions in the field that can be measured, or it's based on a standard efficiency or applicable code level efficiency, depending on the circumstances. In either case, documenting the existing conditions, both at the equipment and the facility level, is extremely important in measurement and verification, as once you have done the retrofit, the baseline no longer exists. So you have to document those conditions and get that data that you need when the time is nigh. Because once it is gone, you have lost that opportunity. If we, now, if you'll recall, I mentioned we were talking about the M&V protocol selection guide. This is from the M&V protocol selection guide. And it's trickled down really from the RTF in defining what is the appropriate baseline. And so they have broken it down to a fairly simple context. So if the equipment is in working order, if it has existing useful life left, therefore making the purchase optional, right? It's not a critical equipment failure, have to get that replaced right away. We use an existing conditions baseline, and that's your in situ measurable conditions. But on the other hand, if you're doing new construction, or if your equipment is at the end of its useful life, if it's 25 years old, a piece of equipment, and it needs to be replaced, your equipment purchase, it's not really optional. This is a mandatory one-for-one, oftentimes, replacement. And using what's called either a code baseline or a current practice baseline is recommended in these circumstances. The current practice baseline is if there's not a code-specific measure, that is our code-specific item that applies, there's current industry practices. So a current practice is that that piece of equipment already comes with a VFD. You're not going to probably get credit for the VFD, as that should be considered part of the baseline. All right. Well, a couple of things. Selecting the baseline being so critical, planning ahead and timing is critical. Measurement and verification is very detailed, but it has to be timely. It has to happen at the right time, and it supports the energy efficiency project. It doesn't drive the energy efficiency project. So it's important to recognize that the measurement and verification activities need to be responsive and made in a timely way. So planning ahead is really critical, and if you, the best way to do that is to make an M&V plan based on the IPMVP or the BPA requirements. It really allows you to think through all of the timing and all of the actions that need to happen to make sure those are feasible and planned out sufficiently. The other thing about measurement and verification that I've learned over the years is that measurements can be difficult, they can be expensive, but they're worth it. Every time you're able to use a field measurement as opposed to an estimate, it really improves your accuracy dramatically. It helps you do an apples to apples comparison. You can capture the independent variable data, make sure routine adjustments that are made to compare your baseline, much more valid and should be considered. A lot of places have the sufficient instrumentation where equipment level metering or facility level metering is commonplace. If it's not commonplace, it's worth thinking about. Adding metering has many additional benefits beyond just the measurement and verification aspects. The other thing is that there's a range of approaches, and look at the value of your savings, the context of your project, the data that's available, who you've got on your team, what your conditions are at the site, and your costs. And, really backing up to that 5,000 or 10,000 foot level is so important when you're planning your measurement and verification, because it's super easy to get in the weeds and to quickly become overwhelmed with an engineering project and an engineering exercise. But keeping it in context of your project and your program is really important. And then finally, regardless, always make sure that the basic goals of the measurement and verification effort have been met, right? Why are we doing measurement and verification? We are doing it to verify the changes were made that have the potential to save energy, right? So hopefully there's been field verification, operational verification is the gold standard, where you're absolutely sure that the measure has the capacity to perform. And then the second part is to measure and document the effects of the project. And that's where a lot of the effort usually ends up. But making sure those changes have the potential to save is very fundamental to all of the measurement and verification efforts. And then I just want to show this slide one more time so folks you can kind of absorb. So we're going to be looking at the M&V protocol selection guide flowchart. And the flowchart ends, it will select one of these methods. And just keep in mind as we're looking at the flowchart that end-use metering and this absent baseline measurement application guide are similar. They go in one bucket. And then all of these guides are different forms of doing an option C whole building mathematical model. And the engineering calculations with verification are really the go-to for the smaller measures. All right, so I hope that you guys have seen this before. This is our M&V protocol selection guide flowchart. Let's see here. And I want to just kind of I want to take it apart. There's 3 big sections, right? So let's look at each one of these sections individually. So if we start at the top, we have UES measures. So is it a UES measure? Is it a standard protocol measure? Which is basically the same thing, except for that there's more steps or it's more complicated. You need a little bit more field data. And so this is the first step and the first stop on our protocol flowchart. So we want to make sure we don't forget about the UES measures. And then the second tier, I guess you would call it, it begins right here. And so if it's not a UES measure, it wants to know what's the level of savings. Are the savings more or less than 200,000 kilowatt hours? And this is on either an ECM or project level, depending on your context. And so if the savings, and then straight out of the gate, you have a decision. You have a judgment decision. Is the engineering calculations the best choice? And it reminds you to think about safety first, always, is it safe to make energy measurements, or are we better off staying in a estimated capacity? And are the measurements going to be accurate? Are the measurements possible? And then would they be sufficiently accurate for our purposes? Are the costs and the timing reasonable? Are we going to be able to do it? Can we afford it in our budget? And then, is there a low variance of savings or other? So is it predictable? Are the operations predictable? And then once you've met all of these criteria, then it's telling you that yes, engineering calculations with verification is your best choice. You'll notice that there's an optional evaluation point here about having a high level of savings and good data on a whole building level, as the verification by energy modeling can be less work and more accurate than creating engineering calculations. So that is in this box as well. The final tier on our flowchart is for pre-post energy measurements. So this has taken us down to doing the IPMVP adherent, mostly adherence methods. And it starts by talking about what data is available and how high are the savings, and can you do energy modeling. So you can end up at two places within this chart. You can end up either with equipment in-use metering, so equipment level energy metering, or you can end up over here at the energy modeling protocol, or one of its sister protocols. So that's a snapshot of the flowchart, and now we're going to cover the protocols themselves. And I'm going to go relatively quickly. I'll be sure and send you this slide deck so that you have these notes to reference in the future. So typically, engineering calculations with verification is an approach based on models of equipment or systems or buildings. It's usually at a system or equipment level. It's for lower savings measures that can have limited variance in the savings, that have predictable schedules and operations, so that the engineering calculations have a chance of being accurate. This is where energy measurements are not feasible, where that energy data on an equipment level is not already available, and is an important safety consideration. Measuring energy use is inherently dangerous. It's important to recognize that. The cost may be impossible and engineering calculations are preferred, or your timing could be out of sync and you cannot conduct the M&V. This is a strong protocol. It has a lot of great guidance in it. It's 81 pages. It also covers, so this is how we've gotten here. We just walked our way through it. We've made a bunch of engineering decisions and decided that engineering calculations are going to work. And they're either going to be in the form of custom engineering calculations, which is what we normally see, and then on a much lesser frequency, we may see some whole facility energy models, such as those in E+ or Energy Plus. The custom engineering calculations, you really have to understand the baseline. They have to have the data and be able to create an engineering model in a spreadsheet of what the energy use is. You do not want this to be an incredibly complex system. That is not a good application for a spreadsheet calculation because we are limited. Whereas the whole facility simulation models are physics-based. They actually use the physics of the HVAC equipment, of the facility, of the walls, and the thermal properties of the air and the sun. So these are much more complicated. You need them when you are in new construction and you have a hypothetical baseline. is the must-have application. The procedure is to have as much field data as possible so that your measure closely reflects part load applications and field operations. Verifying the measure, again, conducting operational verification and truing up your calculations is an expected part of this procedure. Checking your results, can be prone to significant errors, so it's very important to do some quality control and to make sure you're using the tips and tricks and best guidance that's available there. This is a good resource. M&V plan and report needs to be as detailed as possible and with equipment specifications and other data that's available. And that's our verification with energy calculations with verification, sorry. The next one is verification by equipment in-use metering, equipment or end-use metering. Sorry, that's an or. So it's either at the equipment level or it's at the end-use level, such as a chiller plant. So this is used where savings are typically greater, where the predictability and the load or hours of use is diminished because that's what your ECM is affecting. Your equipment monitoring may exist or can be installed. This protocol focuses heavily on defining the load and hours of use. And this is an extension of ASHRAE, I think it's guideline, 14, that talks about end-use metering. And this brings it up to an additional level of detail. So this is used on, again, when there's limited interactions and you're able to go just at the equipment or end-use level. So this protocol requires measurements before and after. It's IPMVP adherent, and under option A or option B, there's still a range of approaches that are viable using this. Option A is less rigorous than option B and requires less measurements. So depending on your situation, this might be, an option A might be preferred. It's not intended for complicated energy flows. And this is how you will really know that you are in the end-use metering, as it talks at length when you get into the document about assessing your load and assessing your hours. And this is a very simple case of either, so constant load, this is a constant load, or a variable load, and then categorizing your schedule, your hours of use as either a time schedule or a variable schedule. And this is really the crux of this protocol. It really helps break down exactly what measurements are going to be needed. Determining your metering plan will drive what you end up doing in this particular one. In this particular methodology, it's an option A, option B approach. It gives you lots of flexibility in terms of either if you have existing energy metering or could benefit from the energy metering to use it, or to focus on the parameters that's the most uncertain, the key parameter that's being changed by your ECM. There's some nice flexibility in the BPA protocol. Instead of requiring, for example, you have to have a whole year of data, you can measure over a full range of operations, which is oftentimes achieved in less than a year. This is an example here of the loads and the hours of operation, which are variable. So you have variable load and variable hours of operation, variable schedules. It gets very complicated very fast, and that is why the end-use measurements are defined clearly. The reporting requirements are detailed and rigorous as they are in all of our measurement and verification reporting. So end-use metering absent baseline. So this falls underneath the end-use equipment or end-use metering protocol, rather. This is used when your in-situ baseline conditions are not viable or not appropriate to be your baseline. So that would be in new construction, major additions, or again, if you had a end-of-life equipment that should be looking at a baseline of a code minimum. It's pretty short, so it is easy to use. And that's the only one that falls under the equipment within use. So now we're going to talk about the verification by energy modeling. Again, this is whole facility energy modeling, and this is used where savings are relatively high compared to whole building energy use, so they are discernible at the whole building level. Typically with multiple interactive ECMs could be included in that, or it could be one big simple ECM. Whole building energy data is required for this type of analysis, and it needs to be rather granular. Daily is typically used, tends to be the most accurate, although hourly analysis is sometimes used depending on if you have demand or other concerns. Energy use modeling at the building level requires predictable schedules and a predictable response to your weather. So that means that you can make a really good mathematical model of your energy use and either your weather and or your schedule data that has low level of uncertainty. And it has less uncertainty than the savings. So if the model is sufficiently accurate to detect the savings which are expected. This is a pretty long document. It's almost 100 pages. It looks relatively bland, but it's quite a good document. And you will get here by coming over to the right-hand side, by deciding that the interval data is going to be preferred over equipment level data. And so verification by energy modeling, as I mentioned, is the primary one, but we also have the energy use indexing protocol, the existing building commissioning guide, which is a whole building modeling guide. And there it is, my strategic energy measurement M&V reference guide. This is also a whole building reference guide. So we have several, 4 really good resources plus for the energy modeling. In general, the procedure follows the IPMVP option C of a whole facility or system level characterization using a mathematical model such as this one that is shown here. This is actually from the SIM guide. And the whole facility is based on outdoor air temperature or other independent variables. And these models, this is where the statistics start to get thrown around a little bit in terms of making sure the accuracy of the model is sufficient to ensure that the savings can be seen. Important to recognize that just because a whole building methodology, option C, is being used, verification is still required. Installation verification, including documentation of both the baseline and the post case, and verification of the operation of your ECMs and your field conditions cannot be shuck. So that still needs to be addressed in your activities and of course in your reporting. If you're doing an existing building commissioning approach, and you might have a more of a system level analysis, this system level and this guide building commissioning, existing building commissioning, has excellent examples of doing system level and also of integrating the measurement and verification and the existing building process so that they're coordinated and can be leveraged and benefit one another. Energy use indexing is a simplification of the energy modeling protocol. And this is, things are normalized to something like units produced. This is also a short guideline. And then the regression modeling reference guide. This one, if you're a newbie to M&V 2.0 or advanced M&V methods, this is a really wonderful resource. It's statistics explained by engineers, energy engineers, so not statisticians. It's a really a different feel. We have really smart people. Our colleague who just retired, Bill Coran, put a lot of his brain work into this, as did David Jump, and it has some really wonderful underlayment to understanding the other protocols. If any of the terminology or things have ever eluded you, this is a great resource for that. This is the Commercial Industrial SIM Guide, is the one that we just revised. This does a nice job of it being inclusive of both commercial and industrial, including some tips and some very strict, not strict, but some precise statistical thresholds for you to use and reference, as opposed to having to search around in other industry documents. Oh, that's just that, and this is just an example of a daily whole building. This is daily whole building energy data, just categorized, and it just shows that these models typically define themselves if you look at the data. All right. Well, those were all of the protocols, and that was the protocol library. Now we have a few additional things. We have some application guides and a few other items in the M&V library that we'll take a quick look at. And then we want to look at the evaluation results and the ideas we have for updates, and your ideas for updates to measurement and verification portfolio here at the BPA library. So again, this is what the library actually looks like. And what we covered today were these three big protocols: the metering, the modeling, and the engineering calculations. And if your eyes start to glaze over, just read the words very carefully, and they'll remind you which ones they are. And this again is the library. And if you take a look, we have looked at all of these today, I think, except for these. So we've not yet, but you will recall the ones in bold are our major, these three: the verification by equipment in use, verification by energy modeling, and energy engineering calculations with verification. So we have an application on peak demand impacts. We have a reference guide on sampling and a glossary that I would draw your attention to. And then we also have these as under related resources. We have a paper from SBW Engineering on non-routine adjustments. We also have the SEM reference guide, as well as the reference guide training that we did a couple of months ago. The peak demand impacts is a very unique and interesting document. It's not too long. It could be illuminating if you are unaware of the winter peaking nature of the BPA portfolio. We have both winter and summer peaking, and this is a very good resource if you're trying to estimate or include any kind of demand impacts within your EEMs. Sampling for M&V is used when we have larger populations, such as lighting, and this allows us to take a statistically valid random sample of our lighting and do only a handful of measurements on those rather than doing a measurement on all of the lighting. And this is where you start hearing that nomenclature about confidence and precision and 90-10 or 80-20. This is where that comes into play. So this is also an important reference if you have populations of equipment. The glossary is comprehensive. It covers all of our reference guides and is very useful. It also includes formulas and other things. So I encourage you to take a look at that document. And that is the final document that I wanted to show you guys. This is everything on one page. It's kind of a lot, and I'll just let this sit for one quick second. Okay, we have about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to look at the possible updates. So we had BPA had an evaluation done on the industrial programs. And these were some of the suggestions. These were the suggestions as they relate to measurement and verification. So they had suggested that perhaps BPA might apply engineering calculations with verification to a wider range of projects. Right now, you know, our cutoff, our soft cutoff is 200,000 kilowatt hours. That there may be additional great applications for engineering calculations for larger projects. And then they also called out that baselines were not being assigned consistently adhering with the RTF's current practice. So they suggested we update the guidance on baselines to more closely match that from the RTF. And that's a real focus on current practice when there is not a code baseline, but you may need, I know, Todd, perhaps you could mention is it a potato shed? Is that what?
Yeah, a spud shed, in other words, where, I think evaporative cooling was surveyed, the market was surveyed, it was concluded that it was by the evaluator that was a standard practice baseline.
So that's the kind of thing. So having this current, and then they actually made a suggestion about a current practice working group. And then of course, classic comments regarding ensuring our engineering calculations and our savings models are conservative and represent part load conditions and follow best practices wherever possible to make sure our savings are not overstated. In addition to aligning with those RTF guidelines, we noticed as a team that the M&V protocol selection guide could have a couple of little updates. We thought that the SIM reference guide could make it in there, maybe that we could change the name of a couple of the guides to be more clear. As it is right now, energy use indexing is a protocol when really it would be more appropriate named an application guide perhaps. And there's a lot of documents, so we were also kind of looking to see was there anywhere that we might consolidate. And there are a couple of the shorter energy modeling guides that could be consolidated as similarly the absent baseline measurement guide if that made sense. And then any other kind of updates here. And I just had a quick summary of this is what we had looked at. These are these resources that we had covered today. So in case you neglected to note those websites, they're right there. And if you have any questions or comments, please, now's the time.
Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Leah, for doing an exceptional job going through that presentation.